In this video, I'm going to run through the top 5 most common questions that come up in Chick-fil-A interviews, and I'm going to help you plan brilliant answers that will get you hired at Chick-fil-A. So let's start with a question that comes up in every interview, and that is, what times can you work at Chick-fil-A? You've got to show them that you are able to work at the times that they need people to staff the business. That's really important. And there's some things you've got to do to be successful and some things you've got to avoid. And the key is, do not start talking about the times you can't work. That's going to make you absolutely ruin this question. So to be successful, you want to show that you're flexible. Show that you can work a range of times. List as many times as you possibly can. Show that you're open-minded. When they ask about various times, try as hard as you can to say yes. If you would prefer other times, say that you could do those times, but you have a preference for this. Show a preference, but don't shut them down on anything. Show that you're committed to your job. If you immediately go into this question and talk about all the times you can't work and all the problems that are going to get in your way and stop you from being at the business, that suggests you're not actually very serious about your job, and that is going to come across very, very negatively. You really want to show that you're meeting the business needs. And I'm going to show you some times in a second that if you mention, it gets them much more interested. The way to fail this question is to come across as awkward, to shut them down and say no to as many times as you can, and also show that you're very picky and very selective, that you're an unhelpful person, that if they need someone at a certain time, you're going to be the sort of person that's just going to say no and not be there and help out the business. And if you're coming across as stubborn, that's also going to cause you to fail really badly. To be successful, focus on saying certain things that they really like to hear. They like to hear that you can work at the opening times. If you can work in school holidays, that's a helpful thing to any business. If you work in the evenings towards the end of the opening hours, that's quite useful. If you're happy to work overtime and do a little bit extra, that's great to mention. One of the unique things about Chick-fil-A is that they're not open on Sundays. So if you have other things in your life, a good thing to mention in this particular interview is that you can move those other commitments to a Sunday. And so that could free up a lot of extra capacity. So you can be working lots of different times because you're not going to be working on Sundays ever because the shop is closed. Chick-fil-A does not operate on a Sunday at all. And a great phrase that you can say if you're really flexible is that you are happy to work to meet business needs, that you have very low restrictions on your availability and you can work around their business needs. If a manager hears that, they are happy. That's going to make them very happy and get you interested in hiring them. The other thing that's going to get them interested in hiring you is if you show that you've really done your preparation. You have to do lots of preparation to be successful. So you've got to prepare to answer the question, what do you know about Chick-fil-A? So to help you prepare for this question, I'm going to show you an approach you can take to the question to score highly, and then run through the key facts that you need to know to be successful. So the way that you think about these, what do you know about the company type questions, is that you start by thinking about, what does everyone know? What do you have to say in order to show that you know just as much as everybody else? Cover the big ideas. Then show off some research. Show off some things that only people that have done some research would know, that you've actually looked into it. And then dig deep. Start dropping in some things that only people who've really done a lot of preparation would know, and that will help you score much higher. So let's run through the key facts that you've got to be aware of. So everyone will know that Chick-fil-A is a fast food restaurant. Mention that. That's what it is. Start with that. You can go on and say the great fact to remember is simply 1946. That's the year it was founded. Say 1946 and they instantly know you have done some research. Memorize that number. It was founded by S. Truett Cathy, and it is still in his family's control. So there's the founder. Remember that name. It was originally called the Dwarf Grill. That's what it was founded as in 1946, and then it evolved into Chick-fil-A. It's now being run, and at the date of publication for this video, by Dan Cathy, who is the founder's son. Though, when you're preparing for your interview, double check who is currently the chief executive or chairman of the company and memorize that. Use that name in your interview. People who've not done the research don't know that name. It is famous for chicken sandwiches. Rather than being based on burgers like McDonald's, this is a chicken-based restaurant. It has got a very strong Christian ethos. They donate a lot of money to religious-based charities. So if that meets with your personal worldview and your religious basis, that's going to help, and you perhaps will engage a little bit better with the company. The company is very well known for its conservative slants on things. If that's a problem for you, this is probably not the right company. They are very, very conservative, and you should be aware of that. They are closed on Sunday. That comes into their Christian heritage. They do not operate on Sundays apart from extremely rare circumstances where they have. For example, in disaster relief, they've opened on a Sunday. They are franchise and corporate owned. So when you're researching the particular one that you're applying to, you need to know, is this a franchise? Are you applying to someone who owns this business as their own business? Is it a group of stores that's owned by a franchise, or are you actually applying to a Chick-fil-A that is owned by Chick-fil-A? You should be aware of that, and it is really important to find that out. It's also very strongly associated with college athletics. They sponsor a lot of leagues, and that is a big part of their branding strategy. Unusually for the fast food industry, they have a catering business, so events can buy in bulk, and the Chick-fil-A company will cater their event. You should be aware of that and mention that. And lastly, my top tip for preparing for a Chick-fil-A interview is to look up on the internet the Chick-fil-A press room, and that will give you recent media coverage. So during your interview, you can bring up a recent story about the company, and that's just another way of showing that you've done your research. So if you could go into your interview and list all of those facts and a recent piece of news, that would score you so high on this question. So run through this, and at the end of the video, look up the press room and have a read at some recent news, and you'll be super well prepared for this. Now that we've prepared for the what do you know about question, now we need to think about your interactions with customers. Unfortunately, when working in food retail, you're going to come into contact with people perhaps you'd rather not have. So a common question that can be asked is, how would you deal with a very rude customer at Chick-fil-A? You could also be asked about abusive customers, or you could be asked about dealing with disagreements with team members and colleagues. And generally, for all those sort of questions, there is a 4-step procedure that tends to score very highly on those questions. So in any of these circumstances, you're always going to start by talking about the fact that you are going to be professional at all times. You have to emphasize that regardless of what's going on around you, you're going to behave professionally and you're going to represent the company in a positive way. You're always going to follow the company's policies. For example, if someone is being rude and abusive and they're demanding a refund, if that requires manager approval, you're not going to just approve it without getting the manager's approval. You're going to follow the company's policies. You don't write the policies, you're going to follow them. You're also going to mention that safety is very important, that you want all guests to have a safe and positive experience, and that your first priority is safeguarding customers and employees. And you're also going to mention, tying into that same point, that your focus is on de-escalation. You're never going to raise your voice, you're never going to argue back. You're always going to try and get the situation under control, keep everyone calm, and make sure everyone has a good experience at Chick-fil-A. And if you stick to those 4 ideas, you will succeed on this question. So let's move on and look at a really, really important question, which is, why Chick-fil-A? Why are you even applying for a job here? Why do you want to work here? And so I'm going to run through some things you've got to say and think about, and some things you absolutely, definitely have to avoid. So the key ideas is, what is special about Chick-fil-A? Why not apply to McDonald's? Why not go to Burger King? Why do you actually want to work at Chick-fil-A? And for many people, that will be because its values are very much the same as your values. If you're very Christian and very conservative, perhaps you are attracted to the company for that reason. And the people that work there will tend to share that view to some extent. Also, why do you want to work in food service? Do you enjoy working with customers? Are you interested in developing skills along the lines of customer service? What are the progression and advancement opportunities? Could you ultimately think about becoming a franchisee? Could you open your own Chick-fil-A? And this is part of your journey towards that. Do you want to move into management? Do you see this as a career? Those are the sort of things you want to talk about. Talk about your values and how you share the values with Chick-fil-A, if you do. And then be super enthusiastic. If you're applying for a job at Chick-fil-A, you actually have to really want to work for the company. And for many people, that's not going to be you. This company is not going to be a fit for a very large number of people. But if it is a fit for you, be enthusiastic about it. Some things you absolutely have to avoid is, don't say you live near one. They don't care. they assume that, and that is not a valid reason for applying for a job. There's lots of other employers in that area. Don't mention about, I've got to earn money somehow. Everybody applying is applying to earn money. That's not going to interest them. It's not relevant. Don't give them the impression that you want to work at Chick-fil-A until you get a better job, that you are planning on leaving. So you're standing in your interview or sitting in your interview and just saying to them, I'm planning on leaving your company very soon because I don't think it's a good job and I'd rather be doing something else. Do not ever give that impression. Even if you're thinking about going to university next year, now is not the best time to bring that up. And really, if you're saying anything that is just not relevant to Chick-fil-A, that is going to massively reduce your chance of getting the job. Focus on things that actually matter to their business, showing that you're a good fit for the company, showing you're interested, showing you're enthusiastic, showing that you've got some ambition and are going to grow with the company, and showing that you're really genuinely interested in working in food service and you're going to enjoy your job. Focus on those sort of things. So here's some inspiration of some things you should be talking about. Brand affinity. If you have a personal liking for the Chick-fil-A brand, now is a good time to bring it up. Say you love the brand. Would you like to own a Chick-fil-A franchise in the future? Talk about how in 10, 15 years, you might really be interested in starting a Chick-fil-A business. Talk about how your vision for yourself and your values lines up with the Chick-fil-A vision and their values. Talk about the progression that's available. Talk about loving working with customers. And then mention the skills like customer service and teamwork that you're going to develop while working for the company. Focus on skill development as well in your answer. And these sort of things are the things that are going to score highly. So mention all the things on the good list and absolutely avoid everything on the bad list, and you will do well. Mention as much of the inspiration as you can, and you're going to score brilliantly on this question. So let's move on and look at strengths and weaknesses. So they could ask, what is your major strengths and what's your major weaknesses? So let's start at looking at how you answer the strengths question. So firstly, it's got to be impactful. It has to be a strength that is really good. So we're starting by looking at strengths. When you say your strength, you want to try and supply some evidence. Actually show them that you really do have this strength. Do you have a reference from a manager? Do you have a qualification? Do you have some experience? Do you have an example of when you used a particular strength? And I'm going to give you some ideas around some strengths that you could use. And really, you're thinking about a strength that is going to make you a great Chick-fil-A hire. You're going to pick something that's actually going to make you really good at your job. If it's not relevant, it's not going to help. And when you answer it, and I'll give you some inspiration of what your strengths might be that you could use, you're going to follow a simple procedure. So start by saying a key strength that I have developed is, I can evidence this by, say what evidence you have. Is that a reference? Is that previous work experience? Can you talk about examples when you've used that skill, or a qualification? That's going to make your answer so much stronger. And then lastly, absolutely say, at Chick-fil-A, this will, and explain to them why your strength is going to make you better at the job. So here's some ideas you could talk about. Customer service experience. If you have worked in customer service successfully and you have a good reference, that is a fantastic strength. That is really the number one thing that they tend to be looking for. Attention to detail is another good one. If you can evidence reliability, that you're going to be at work on time, every time, that's going to really go a long way. If you are very friendly and that comes across in the interview, and you can talk about being well liked and get on very well with people, that is a really useful strength to have. So stick to as many of these ideas as you can on the arrow and pick a really strong strength that's going to make a big difference to Chick-fil-A's business, and you'll be successful on this. Now let's look at the weakness question, which is the question that can destroy the entire interview. So you must prepare for this one. If it comes up and you can't name a weakness, it's going badly. If it comes up and you name the wrong weakness, it can tank the entire interview. So you're going to start by remembering, don't fake it, right? I am a total perfectionist in everything I do. That is not a weakness. That's like a fake weakness. Absolutely avoid doing that. Make sure that you are doing something about it. So when you say a weakness, immediately follow that up by saying, and this is what I plan to do to overcome this weakness. And you also have to make sure it's something that Chick-fil-A doesn't care about. Do not pick a weakness that is actually really important for the job. So for example, saying, I struggle with body odor. well, they're not going to hire you. If you say, I struggle with body odor and basically I'm going to come into work smelling badly, they are not going to hire you at all. Do not pick a strength that has anything important to do with the business. If it's going to affect their business negatively, don't bring it up. That's a bad weakness to pick. And the way that you structure your answer, I'm going to give you some ideas of some weaknesses that don't affect your score negatively, is when you're giving your answer, say a weakness that I'm aware of is, make sure you emphasize that you're aware of this weakness, you know about it, and then spend most of your time talking about things that you're going to do to overcome it. So for example, taking an online course, looking to get some more education, looking to get some mentoring and support from your manager in overcoming this, for example. So some ideas that you could use is you could talk about the fact that you can only speak English if you're applying to a Chick-fil-A in a location where virtually everybody speaks English. If you're applying to a Chick-fil-A in a location that's very multilingual, that's not a good one to pick. But the reason why that's often a good weakness is probably everyone else applying for the job has that weakness, unless, for example, you're in a heavily Spanish-speaking area. That's the one to watch out for. Delegation, if you're applying for an entry-level job, you're not going to delegate to anyone really. So delegation as a weakness is not going to be a problem. And you can talk about how you're going to develop that skill with the company as you grow and progress. Math is not going to be terribly important. Tills do pretty much everything for you. That's not going to be an issue. And if you're not going to be expected to write anything, spelling is a good weakness to use, because if you're not writing anything, the fact you can't spell doesn't even matter. So there are some key weaknesses that you can use that are not going to have a massively negative effect, but are actually genuine weaknesses that you could easily do something about. So before we finish, as a bonus, here is some great questions that you can ask them at the end of your interview. Definitely ask them what the next step in the hiring process is. Show that you're really serious about getting the job and you're actually genuinely interested to know. That shows some enthusiasm. You should ask them what you can do now to be really well prepared for the job. So if you are successful, how could you prepare to be really effective on day one? Show some interest in your team. Ask about the team at Chick-fil-A. Show that you genuinely care about your colleagues. So before you've even started with the company, ask about the people you're working with. Show that you're interested and that you care. Another clever question you can ask, and you have to be careful about how you ask it, is to ask them in general terms what a perfect Chick-fil-A employee looks like. So that when the manager describes what they see as a perfect employee, you can learn one from that. So if you're not successful in the interview, you know the things to work on. And if you are successful, it's going to be really helpful for when you start, but also it's going to give you an opportunity to help remind the manager of your previous answers to questions and show how you match up to what they are actually looking for. And lastly, you have to make up one question on the day. You have to be listening to what they are saying. It's a two-way conversation, and actually make up one question. So take a mental note of something as you're going along and ask that question to show that you're listening. And I hope that you get the job at Chick-fil-A. You seem very well prepared, that you sat through this whole video, and I hope I've shared some really useful tips to you. And finally, best of luck in your interview, and thank you for watching.